Hello people of the internet and welcome back to another video. I'm Seal for SealTheProducer.com and the Producer's Blog, and in today's video we're going to talk about exporting settings. I know it's really boring, but we need to know what we're doing when we export our files, our sessions. So I'm going to start from Logic and then explain a little bit about Logic's exporting settings, and then I'll jump to Pro Tools, and then I'll jump to a little bit of FL Studio. The settings are pretty much going to be the same, but I'll show you just where to find all the settings and the options that we have to decide from. So let's start from Logic. Now in Logic, exporting is actually called bouncing, and in Pro Tools it's the same thing. So we don't have to look for exporting, we have to look for bouncing. If we go on File in the menu right here and you scroll down, you'll find the bounce option. You have a track in place and replace all tracks, or project or section. Since we want to export a section, this section right here, we're gonna go with the project or section. As you can see, the shortcut is Command B, and actually I suggest that you learn this shortcut because it's one of the most used shortcuts in Logic. So at the end of a project at least. So we're gonna click Command plus B, and this dialog right here will come up. Now in Logic, there's a really neat thing that you can do. You can bounce a few different formats at the same time, and as you can see here, I have a few selected. This PCM is actually the normal full resolution file, and the MP3 file is obviously the compressed version of that same file. So let's start from the uncompressed file, and we have a few options right here. So we'll talk about file format first. The WAV file is probably going to be the default. If it's not, just click on the WAV file. We don't really care about AIF, and we certainly don't care about CAF, so we'll just stick with the WAV file. Then we'll go to the resolution. Now, the resolution is really important. The resolution is our bit depth. Now, the bit depth is something really important because in our in every session that we do, as long as we stay in our DAW, for the most part we want to stay at the highest resolution that we can. So we want to stay at either 24, 32 bits, etc. So Logic's capabilities go only up to 24, but for example Pro Tools, and I think maybe Studio One, goes to 32 bits. So depending on what you're doing, you want to export at either 24 or 16 bits. 16 bits is the normal CD quality file, and if you try to burn a CD with a 24-bit file, it probably won't work. It won't play back in any CD player, so you need a 16-bit file. However, if you're selling beats online where people, for example, are going to buy that beat and then put it back into a DAW to record some vocals or do whatever with that beat, you probably want to leave it at 24 bits. I like to bounce all my WAV files, all my beats, for example, for my beat site at SealTheProducer.com at 24 bits, because I know that people are gonna then grab that high quality file and import it in their DAW, record the vocals, export it for distribution in MP3s or WAV files of lower quality. So in the same way, if I'm sending a mix to a mastering house or a mastering engineer in general, they'll probably want a 24-bit file. Most engineers ask for a 24-bit file, so we want to give them that high resolution file. Instead, if you just want to send a file to a CD printing house or whatever, or you're just printing your own CDs, then you might want to choose the 16-bit file. 8 bits is probably going to be completely useless in today's modern file formatting, so we don't really care about 8 bits. I'm going to stick with 24 bits at this point. because we don't really need the 16 bits, and it's just for I'm just showing the concepts right here. So 24 bits. The sample rate. Now the sample rate for the most part should be at the same sample rate of your session. So in this case, this session was created with a 44.1 kilohertz sample rate. So I'm gonna bounce out to 44.1. Now 44.1 is the CD quality sample rate. So if you try to burn a CD with a 96 kilohertz file, then it probably won't work. So you want to bounce it out at 44.1. Now, if you have a higher quality session, like for example, back in the day, I used to record a lot of 96 kilohertz drums and vocals and all that sort of stuff in Pro Tools. When I got to bouncing, I usually degraded, let's say, the sample rate at 44.1, because 44.1 is just the standard resolution or sample rate that will work on most CD players and plays in general, supports in general. So you want to try and keep the highest resolution that you can, but if you can't and you have to bounce it out for a CD, then passing from 96 or 88 or 88.2 or whatever to 44 is gonna be fine. As long as you keep in mind that. Now, you don't really want to go lower than 44.1, because 44.1 is the minimum sample rate that you need for high quality audio. Now, if you know a little bit about the Nyquist theory, you should know that 44.1 is the minimum that we need to have for proper playback. Now, of all frequencies of our human hearing. If you don't know about the Nyquist theory, just Google it and just type it in Google, and you'll find the correct explanation. We can talk about that more if you want to, but I'm not gonna talk about it here. So 44.1. Now, the file type in this case, I'm not sure that all DAWs have this option, but Logic has it, and I think Pro Tools has it as well. You can choose between a interleaved file or a split file. A split file, in Pro Tools at least, means that we'll give you a left and right channel instead of a summed stereo channel. So you'll have two separate files that you can then import in your DAW and manipulate in a different way. You can manipulate the left and right channel in a different way. However, since we're mixing a stereo file, since we want a final stereo file, we're just gonna leave interleaved, sorry. So dithering. Now, dithering is something really important that a lot of beginners miss, and it's something that we need to know about. Whenever you're passing from a 24-bit file to a lower bit depth file, you want to add a little bit of dithering. So whenever you, for example, you're working on a high resolution session in Logic or Pro Tools or whatever at 24 bits or 32 bits, and then you want to go to 16-bit for delivery, you have to add a little bit of dithering. Now, dithering is basically a small little noise that is introduced in your file to compensate for all the quantization errors that occur when you pass from a high resolution file to a lower resolution file. You can read more about dithering in Google if you want a really specific explanation, but basically when you're exporting a file and you want to export to a lower bit depth, you always have to add some dithering, or it's a good idea to add some dithering. Now, in this case, we have three options. I usually like to think about it as the more dense the mix is, so the more elements there are. So say it's a rock or metal mix or a hip-hop mix with loads of instruments, loads of bass, loads of high-end, loads of everything. I'll usually use a number 3 dithering. Well, if it's something like a singer-songwriter, so just some vocals and a guitar, something like that, I'll use a number 1 dithering. Now, the 2 is for something in the middle, so you just have to experiment a little bit with your dithering settings and here if you can actually hear the difference, because the thing is, you probably won't hear the difference, but it will make a difference. So I don't know how to explain it, because it's something that it's really, really subtle, and it's not, don't think about it as say your tape hiss, your normal tape hiss or tape noise that we were so accustomed with, that sort of white noise that we so despise. It's more of a just a very sort of digital low volume, super low volume noise that we need to add when passing from a high resolution to a lower resolution. So in this case, it's a hip-hop mix, loud hip-hop mix, and I'd choose number 3 dither, but I'm not actually lowering my resolution, so I'm gonna just gonna stay with no dithering, since I'm staying at 24 bits. So the next option would be to decide if we want to bounce in real time or offline. Now, real time is something that you'd use when you have some output gear or some gear that needs real-time processing. So in this case, we don't have any outboard gear, so we're just going to do offline, because it's quicker and it's just as good. The only time I'd use real time is, say I have a vocal and I'm using my outboard compressor, my outboard 1176, and I'm passing through that outboard while I'm mixing, and so I have to export that chain through the compressor and back, let's say, into the export, into the bounce. So that would be the only time I'd use a real-time the real-time mode right here. So I'm just going to use the offline right here. So include audio tail. In this case, I have this this region selected, this loop selected, so it's going to get to the end and stop the bouncing process. But if I have include audio tail, so let's say I have a reverb or something on a vocal or some effect that has a tail or a delay or something that will continue after the end of the loop, of the section that I want to export, the include tail will wait for the tail, the reverb tail or whatever tail, to decay to 0 before ending the exporting process, the bouncing process. So in this case, I don't want it, I don't need it, but if you're doing like a mastering, if you're bouncing something for mastering, you probably want to include audio tail. Normalization is something that you just want to keep off at all times. Basically, normalization just drives everything to 0, and it sort of cuts off everything at 0, and it's sort of a limiting and loudness type of thing, and we don't really need it, we don't really want it, because it usually sounds really, really super bad. So just keep it off at all times. At this point, we'll just click on bounce. A dialog will come up with the name that we want to choose for the file and the directory in which we want to place that file, and then we can export it. It'll take a few minutes and it'll export it, bounce it, and we'll be fine. So now we're inside Pro Tools. Now, Pro Tools works in a similar way to Logic. There's just a few different things that we need to know about, and it's actually pretty simple. So we're gonna select the region that we want to export or bounce. In this case, it's gonna bounce from here to here. And then we're going to check our output, our master output, and it says output 1 and 2. So the whole mix is going through output 1 and 2. And this will come in handy when we get to the exporting settings. Now, if we go into files, bounce to disk, so it's option plus command plus B. So we're just going to press Alt or option, command and B, command or control obviously on PC, and we will see our bounce source. Now our bounce source is our output source in this case. In this case it's output 1 and 2. As we can see here, it's output 1 and 2 selected. So we're gonna go on to the file type. The file type is the same as the file format in Logic, so we're just gonna choose the WAV format, and it's the same as the WAV format in Logic. We have an SC2, IF, MP3, QuickTime. Now in Pro Tools, we can only bounce one format at the time. So in this case, I'm just going to go for WAV now, and then if I need the MP3, I'm just going to export it or bounce it later. Now, so WAV selected. File format, again, interleaved, multiple mono, or mono summed. Now, mono summed will mean that the left and right channel are summed into a mono file. Multiple mono is the left and right channel separately in two different files, and the interleaved file is one stereo file. So we're just going to choose the stereo file, the interleaved file. Same as for Logic, 24 bits. Here we have a 32-bit floating point. It's a higher resolution, but since the session is at 24 bits, I'm gonna export at 24 bits. Now, the sample rate, same thing. We have a 44.1. The session is at 44.1, so we're gonna stick with our 44.1. So the conversion quality is something that, as long as you stay in 44.1 kilohertz, you won't have the option to choose from. But if you go to a higher sample rate, like 96 kilohertz, for example, you can actually choose the quality more in depth. I don't really care about this. The 44.1 is just fine for me, so I don't really need that extra control. Share with SoundCloud Gobbler, none actually. I don't care about that now. I'm just gonna export it to a directory on my computer, on my hard drive. Enforce Media Composer compatibility. We don't really care about this because we're not doing any video work. If we were to work with Media Composer or an editor, a video editor using Media Composer, we might choose to check this option. But since we're not, and we're just bouncing to our internal hard drive for distribution, iTunes, whatever, we're just gonna keep it unchecked. So conversions options: convert during bounce, convert after bounce. I like to convert after the bounce just because it takes a little bit of pressure off the CPU and the RAM, or just the computer overall. So instead of doing two processes at the same time, it's just going to do one at the time, and it's just going to be a little bit more, less heavy on the computer. Okay, so last but not least, FL Studio. This is FL Studio 11 for the Mac. It's the wrapped version for the Mac, so it'll have all the PC sort of fonts and general menus and stuff. I have actually, I think I have FL Studio 12 on my other computer. I don't really use FL Studio that much, so there's no point in me showing you the other computer. I'm just gonna show you the general settings on this computer right here in FL Studio 11, and I'm sure that the 12 will pretty much be the same. But I also know that a lot of you guys out there use FL Studio and are big FL Studio fans, so I don't want to offend anyone. Make sure to let me know in the comments below if there's something that I've missed, or if I've said something wrong about FL Studio, because as I've said earlier, I'm not that experienced with FL Studio. So in FL Studio, it's actually called exporting. It's export, so you have to look for exporting. This is what I'll usually do. I'll have a selection, like in this case. Actually, let me just, okay, this 4-bar selection right here. I'm gonna go into File, Export, WAV file, MP3 file. Those are the two only ones that I really use. I'm not sure if the shortcut works with this wrapped version. Let's see. Control R. Yeah, it works. Okay, so it's Control R as we, hold on, cancel. Let's see it again. WAV file is Control plus R. Control on the PC and Mac. The MP3 is Shift Control R. Let's see if that works. Shift Control R. And that works too. So we have the file type here. We can still change the file type here, so it doesn't matter even if you press the Control R, which would be only for the WAV file. We can still change to MP3 or other file formats. So just give it the name, there's not much that we can choose. I think it all goes with the settings of the session. So if the sample rate and everything decided in the settings, which I'm not sure where they are actually. Okay, sample rate is here, 44.1. The bit depth, I'm not too sure where to find it. Resampling, no, I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm sure that some of you can tell me in the comments below. So the exporting goes with the settings of the session. Now this has blocked. Okay, you can change the name, change the file type, and then choose your directory and export, save, and it will export your beautiful music composition. Now that's pretty much it for FL Studio. And as I said again, I'll say it for the third time, if there's something that I've missed, make sure to drop it in the comments below and let me know what I've missed, or if I can say something better or do something better if I have to edit something from this video. Okay people, so that's all we got time for today. Make sure to like and subscribe, drop a comment below if you'd like to know something more about exporting, about bouncing, about however you want to call it. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to, what would you like to see in the next videos. I'm always up for a challenge, I'm always up for helping you out in the things that you're struggling with. Make sure to visit sealtheproducer.com/theproducersblog for more audio and production goodness, and while you're there, there's a sign up form on the right or at the bottom if you're on mobile. Make sure to sign up to that, and you'll download my free ebook, The 5 Mixing Techniques You Should Be Using Right Now. It's awesome, it'll change your life, you'll love it. So having said this, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.